This video of stringing the sidewalls is pretty self-explanatory in that you can just watch pretty much what interlocks I use and more or less where I put them, and you can just copy that. I figured I would just talk about the why for a lot of these things that I'm doing here in this sidewall pattern. So at the top, we're going to string the top half, pretty much the top 2/3 of this pocket to the inside. We're going to do that to accentuate the channel. We're going to bring the outer edges of the mesh inward, inside the frame of the head, so that we can hug the ball a little bit more. Like I said, it's gonna accentuate the channel. It's gonna add a little bit more give to the top of the pocket. We want the ball to sit high in a women's lacrosse pocket, as high as possible while still having a channel. And typically, the higher you sit the ball in any pocket, whether it's a men's pocket or women's pocket, that is typically what you sacrifice, is the channel, because the top of the head is the widest part of the head. So a low pocket is going to have a really long, really defined channel. A high pocket with a defined channel is they're somewhat contradictory ideas to an extent. That's why stringing to the inside, especially for the top of the pocket, helps, because you get to bring the outer edges of the mesh in toward the ball, and you add depth to that same area of the pocket. So now that we're more than half, we're about 2/3 of the way down. You see the tension that we're forming here with the channel. We're going to do one more interlock to the inside. Now we're about 2/3 of the way down the sidewall rail. Now we're going to switch the type of interlock we're doing. We're going to switch our stringing method, and we're going to actually switch to stringing on top of the rail. We're going to now pull the outer edges of the mesh up to the top of the rail and toward the outside of the frame of the head. So to do this, to start, we're just going to start with an empty knot, which is a knot in the sidewall pattern that is not tied to any piece of the mesh or any mesh diamonds or anything. It's just an empty knot. It's a knot with nothing in it. I use these to keep the part of this sidewall pattern I've already strung tight, and you see how now I can kind of let that string go and kind of plan my next move with the sidewall pattern. If that were an interlocker, if I didn't have that empty knot there, I would have to hold the strings tightly with my thumbs, and it doesn't allow you the freedom to look up and down the sidewall rail and plan your next interlock. So now we're just going to float some diamonds down low. We don't really have to do anything fancy here as far as tightening the bottom third of the pocket width-wise, because you can see that these diamonds down low are already much smaller. The mesh feels firmer in the bottom. The bottom half or the bottom third of this ignite mesh, so the ball won't naturally sit down there comfortably as it is. But just to help it, we're not going to string the bottom of the pocket to the inside. We're just going to string it on top of the rail. So again, about 2/3 of the way down through the sidewall pattern, we're switching our stringing method. We were stringing to the inside in the top 2/3, and that's just a look at the channel, or half the channel, whenever I string the other side and get it pounded out and everything. That's what it'll look like. And then I'm going to show you the bottom string here in a minute. But so we're channeling the pocket and we're adding depth, and we're doing those two things in the same step. So this is the channel after you pound it out a little bit. It's not the tightest channel in the world, but that's getting the channel pretty tight while stringing the pocket so that the ball sits in the top third, or at the very least the top half of the pocket. We definitely don't want the pocket to go down low. Every player is different. Most women's players that I've strung for whether they're middle schoolers or high school players or collegiate players. They want the ball sitting up in the sweet spot. With a traditional pocket or stringing with a center runner, that's a lot easier to do. With a full piece of mesh, it's not as easy to do. So that's something that you give up. If you want more feel in the pocket, more, I guess, a different type of hold, then mesh may not provide that feeling that you want. It's definitely going to limit it a little bit. It's more of a muted, the ball is in there because of the weight, but you're not going to feel it in every crevice of the pocket like you will with cross-lace and leathers. The benefit is that mesh is very consistent. And obviously stringing a mesh pocket takes a fraction of the time stringing a traditional. This pocket's going to stay like this for a while. If it starts to bag out or get too deep, you can just retie the bottom string and tighten it. A really simple bottom string. It just has to serve its purpose down there. And this is pretty much it. This is how I go about stringing sidewalls with Mesh Dynasty Ignite Mesh. Next video, we'll do the shooting strings.